Welcome to the mobile home movement, where we showcase the beauty and affordability of mobile homes. Here we break false myths and share all the positive stories of how mobile home ownership transforms lives. I'm Franco Perez, and this is the mobile home movement. What's up, guys, and welcome to the Mobile Home Movement podcast. I'm Franco Perez, your host, and we have a special guest today. We have Nugget, we have Lily Bear, and Sunny Bear. We're actually going to be talking about a lot that's been going on in the mobile home market, a lot that's happened in 2024, and we're starting to see now in the first few months of 2025. So what's tending to happen is we have a lot of people that are stuck in their homes. They're not able to upgrade their mobile home, and they need to find a new place to live, or they need a transition, but they don't want to move twice. So we're starting to see a more and more common situation where you have what we sometimes call a double transfer or a double sale, or now we call it the trade up program, which is probably more popular, which is we have a mobile home owner that's living in a mobile home. They do want to sell, but they don't want to sell unless they have the new home that they want, right? So in that new home can be purchasing another mobile home that's bigger or better, or it can be purchasing a mobile home in a different city, which we've helped several times, or it can be purchasing a single family home or a townhouse. So these transactions are very delicate and very complicated. I brought Sunny in today because she's done this so many times in 2024, and she has a lot of them that are kind of pending this year as well. And if you can imagine how complex a transaction is, it makes it 3 or 4 times more complex when you have 2 transactions that need to all align at the same time. So thanks for being here, all 3 of you.
Thanks for having us.
Tell us a bit about what it's like working with a double close or a trade up. Or actually, let's first start with, why do mobile homeowners typically do that?
Yeah, so basically what you said, especially coming into this year and last year too, there has been an influx in my my client pool where they are mobile home owners and they want to sell, but they only want to sell if they find a new place to live. And majority of the time it is for more space. A lot of the families I've helped has been, we have 2 kids and we are currently living in like a 2-bed, 2-bath. It was good for a while, but now that they're growing older, they need more space, they need more privacy. So that's why they want to upgrade. That, or the vice versa too, where they're empty nesters. So they've had the kids, they've had like the 3-4 bedroom home, and now it's just the 2 of them, and it's a lot of space for just a couple, an elderly growing couple. So now they tend to want to downgrade into something more something more quaint, or more importantly in a 55 and up community, so that they can be around more like social circles and socialize.
Cool. So I want to get into the meat of this. Some people also call this a bridge move. So they're pretty much bridging from the current home that they own into another home that they would like to own, right? So one of the big fears that a lot of clients have is, hey, is this possible? How do I make sure that if I sell my home, that this, that I'm not going to end up homeless at, any part of this transaction?
Yeah. And that's that's basically the recurring fear that they voice when they do meet with us and everything. So we're just here to reassure them that, like, as their agent, we are, like, our job is to protect them. It's called like a replacement property contingency, where they will only move out and proceed with the sale of their home if and when they find a replacement property to move into. So
what's a contingency?
Contingency, I always explain contingencies as like, they're kind of like walls of protection. So any wall of protection to protect you, to protect your client, or sometimes if you're the buyer agent, to protect their deposit or their good faith money.
So, how does the contingency work in this type of transaction?
So usually, a lot of it.
Because the seller won't have a EMD or deposit.
Yeah.
Right? So how would that work in this replacement property?
So in this case, we're not really protecting their deposit. We're more protecting them and their residency in their current home and whatnot. Usually, when we go list their home, most of the time, or most cases that occurred last year, they don't have a home that they want to move to yet. So when it comes time to review offers and whatnot, or just when I'm listing the listing, I do let buyer agent know what the situation is so that the buyer kind of knows the entire context as well. When we go to accept an offer, we make sure that the contingency is in place to make sure that the buyer is also aware that the sale of the homeowner's home will not go through until we find a replacement property for them.
So it's kind of like how I describe a contingency is like if this then that, right?
Yeah.
So like going back to that big fear that a lot of sellers have is like I don't want to put my home on the market and then we get an offer that we'd like and then if it gets sold, we accidentally let go of our home and now we don't have a place to move to in our own location, right? So in simplicity, that for sale contingency means that all can happen, but it can all be cancelable if they don't find the home that they want, right? So that's what the big fear is, and that's where we act to protect them with the contracts and everything to make sure that contractually everything's all done correctly and that at every step everyone's all on the same communication like you described is the buyer's agent making the offer knows that there's going to be a contingency in place and that's actually done correctly. And then the other is if that can rely on them finding a home as well. So there's two separate contingencies that are added into that complexity of this contract. But surprisingly, you've been able to do this and master this a lot last year.
Yeah, surprisingly.
Yeah. So what were some of the key things that are important to executing these trade-up sale situations?
Yeah, so it's definitely more work than, let's say, like dual agency or just representing your client on one side of the transaction because now you're kind of playing both on two different ends too. So it's making sure that they're protected as the sellers, making sure that the buyer agent during the sale of my client's home is aware of the situation, but then on the other side too is finding them a home and letting their seller agent know, and then kind of just balancing the act because what makes it kind of complicated is aligning up these two transactions to have the smoothest transition as possible.
So let's talk about PDR. Let's use real life situations in their first name too. So PDR 510. They were looking to sell their home, but they didn't want to sell until they found the home, right? So what were the steps involved in making that happen?
Yeah, so PDR 510, basically they were open to moving into something more temporary, like an apartment, short-term Airbnb. So we had that safety net if we had to. But what happened was we found a buyer, very strong buyer. They understood that the ideal situation for my sellers was to find a home to move into prior to closing, just so that they don't have to go through that transition, like short stay if they don't have to. But stars really did align, and that's why we always preach that it's important to work with a mobile home, not only work with a mobile home specialist, but work with a mobile home specialist in a good team, because we had a listing coming up in a very low turnover park, very highly desirable park, that I was able to submit an offer for and make that smooth transaction possible too.
So why is that important? working with a big team and the inventory.
Because it would have been so much harder, and I've done other transactions this way too. It would have been so much harder to have their home go pending, and then we're kind of starting from scratch too, where we're going on showings for active listings, and depending on the park, if it's a low turnover, highly desirable park, we're probably competing against like 7 to 9 offers. But with our team, because Franco was representing the his seller wanted a smooth transaction. He wasn't interested in a bidding war. He just wanted someone strong, cash, easy to close, and that's exactly what my sellers were capable of. So that's why it worked out. If you worked with, let's say, just like a regular real estate agent, they don't have that leverage that they could use, and that could be a disadvantage when you're on a time crunch and then you have to be competing against all these other offers.
Yeah, the likelihood of it happening, what you're saying is, what I'm hearing you say is that it really matters, like, who has the inventory.
Exactly.
In order to make these special situations happen, right? Because what's PDR 510's name?
Seth.
So if Seth was selling his mobile home in Sunnyvale, and what happened then?
She moved to Pioneer.
She got an offer on her home?
Yes, she did.
Okay, so she's selling her home in the mobile home in Sunnyvale. So she's selling that home.
Yes.
She had to find a buyer that was willing to wait for her to also buy a home, right? So this is where that complexity happens. Seth is selling her home. I really want to clarify this again because it's very important. Seth is selling her home in Plaza del Rey in Sunnyvale. We found her a buyer through our pool, and then Sunny helped her find another dream mobile home that's in her criteria, and found that through our team because we have listings of on market, off market, whatever it is. Made that case work for that transition to Pioneer.
In Milpitas.
Right? In Milpitas.
Yeah.
And there's a seller in Pioneer that's also involved in this transaction.
Correct.
So that's where this gets very complicated. You have the buyer, you have multiple people involved. You have the buyer for the PDR, Plaza del Rey home. You have the seller for Plaza del Rey. You have that same seller doing the buying side of Pioneer, and then the seller of Pioneer moving out as well. So that's really representing 4 client positions at the same time, right? So with that, all 4 of those sides have to all line up and work perfectly. Timeline, financing, money, escrow, everyone has to be aligned and on the same page. It's very much like a solar eclipse, and for that to happen, it's kind of an anomaly, right? How do you get all of these 4 targets to align in a straight line, all on the same page? And it really takes laser precision to be able to make that happen. So seeing you do that super complex maneuver and make it successful for all 4 sides really makes a big difference. So what are kind of things that you find that are most important? I know we talked about timeline, contracts. Was the relationship with the parks, did that make a difference at all? Was the knowledge of how mobile home residency law, is that ever important? Or how the contracts work? Tell me kind of more about what are the things to look out for in these situations.
Yeah, so not only what you mentioned already, but I feel like just having someone that is knowledgeable in everything that you already said, but the communication and everything too, balancing, making sure you know what you're doing, and the relationships between not only the park managers, but also between real estate agents too. Because let's say me and you, we work together, you know how I work, so you're able to at least vouch for me in some capacity when you reviewed my offer in Pioneer, say, Sunny's done this like time and time again, like I trust her, this is how she works. I have enough confidence in her to pull through. And on the other end too, when we were selling PDR 510, when you start when you're working with a team and you close like numerous deals, you're gonna be working with sometimes with the same agent. So on the buyer agent side too, for PDR, I was lucky enough to be working with an agent in the past where they knew how I work, so they were able to vouch for me for their buyer agent, for their buyer and their client too. So throughout the process, since we know like residency law, we know we have good relationships with the park, we are able to line up on the timing of when to get park approval. If we need it to be a little bit quicker than the 14 business days, because the park manager really liked us, they're able to pull through a little bit in this case. And if there were any delays, be having that open communication and being proactive and everything and having that relationship with existing agents and the park really helped.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so where does because there's a lot of delicate things you have to do with the park management,
Mm-hmm.
and you really have to know what you're doing to make that alignment happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how did the relationships with parks make a difference?
Well, working in the park multiple times a year definitely really helps out, especially for PDR too and Pioneer. Although it's a low turnover park, we've worked in the park a number of times. So both park managers,
So low turnover meaning
not a lot of listings go up for sale in that
Gotcha.
park.
okay.
So because I've worked in that park multiple times, I know their park approval process. I know what the application looks like. I know what they're looking for, what the common like mistakes are and everything. So to avoid that back and forth, what I do with my clients is I make sure that we sit down and we fill out the application together. This is so that I can run through everything and make sure everything's good and completed before we turn in, to avoid that back and forth. And that also means that we avoid like losing more time and we can close very efficiently.
Cool. And with that, what tends to happen at close date? So tell me about how the timeline works when it comes to closing this, because the seller for PDR is in a pending process.
Yes.
How long can that timeline be for her to sell her home and then find the home? Or how long was that process for Seth?
So surprisingly, like 30 days, which is pretty standard close of escrow date and everything.
30
So
days from when she got the contract?
30 days of when she accepted an offer on
So
her
she
home.
accepted an offer with a for sale contingency protecting her to be allowed to move.
Exactly.
So from that from that offer acceptance, how long does she have to find the home that she wants?
Usually in the contract it says about 17 days, but again, we were lucky enough because you had a listing that we really wanted, so we were able to close within those 30 days.
So what happens if it goes past those 17 days and she doesn't find the home?
So because the contingency is in place, if she doesn't find a place, we can either ask the buyer side of her sale for her home to give us an extension. That's why it's important to find a buyer that's understanding the situation and wants the home enough to be able to be patient. Or if the buyer, or if we can't come to some sort of resolution, we have that contingency in place to stop the sale. Because if we cannot find a replacement property, we are not going to go through with the sale.
Because I think that's the big concern that people are afraid of, is if they go pending, they accept an offer, it doesn't mean they're pressure or panicking to try to find a home that they're not happy with.
Exactly.
So what happened with her? You found them a home in how many days? And
I think it was like a week.
a week. So you found them a home in a week. And then what ended up happening?
Yeah. So
you found Pioneer and
so we found Pioneer because on the Pioneer side, our transaction was going to be a cash offer. We were only waiting for park approval, which takes about 14 business days. On the sale of Steph's home, The PDR side, it was a loan offer. So loan, because you have to do more paperwork, there's more things that come into play, appraisal, things like that. It took the entire 30 days, but we were able to line it up to close at the same time.
So, I'm a little bit, I want to make sure that the listeners really understand what's happening here. So you found the buyers for the Plaza Del Rey. Now you found the seller of Plaza Del Rey, Seth, a home in Pioneer. Why did they like that area?
It was a 55 and up park. They didn't have any kids, and the space rent was
They wanted
super
a
low.
home with lower space rent.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So she decided to make that large leap of faith and jump into that Pioneer mobile home park. Seller had to agree as well. Seller has to agree that they know that everything in the back part of that transaction is happening. They accepted on those terms, and then everything that I mentioned, those 4 stars, all align at the same time, and it all closes exactly at the same time.
Yeah.
All of these contingencies, or if this then that statements, rely on each other, right? So if this closes, this closes, this closes, this closes, right? It's like a domino effect, and it all gets clumped together to that same moment so that everyone's all happy and everyone's all protected with their home, right? So that's really what's key with a lot of these transactions, and we're starting to see this a lot more often. Sellers that, perfect example in Plaza Del Rey where they have high space rents, they want to move to another mobile home that has a lower space rent. But it complicates life if you have to sell, rent, move everything to that rental, and then shop to buy, right? So we have a lot of clients that are coming to us to sell, but only in the fact that we help them find their new location and become that A to Z part of that transaction, right? So that's really amazing. Let's see, what are things that, so what, I know this person, it's a mobile home owner that wanted to get another mobile home with lower space rent. What are other reasons? We have people that are upgrading to
Residential.
a bigger mobile home, upgrading to use that money to buy a residential home, which
Yeah.
is very complicated as well, and it's
my
usually
gosh.
hard to get your offer accepted in that term too, but you've done it.
Yeah.
What are other reasons why people are doing that trade up or bridge transaction?
That's kind of one of the main reasons that they say.
You mentioned downsizing too, right?
Downsizing, like the space, even though Pioneer, the space rent was low, the square footage was a little bit smaller too. So you like downsizing, square footage, cheaper space rent, moving into a 55 and up community, because in those communities they tend to have more like social events going on for their residents versus, let's say, like all ages, where it's more like kid oriented, things like that. Another one would be upgrading to using the equity for a mobile home to buy a residential. So I never really started doing that up until like last year and into this year too.
Wow. That's amazing. So that's awesome. People are selling their mobile home and then buying single family homes. It's such a beautiful thing. They're upgrading from that. I mean, it just comes to show like that them buying a mobile home in the past has been so great for them, right?
Yeah, a good financial decision, generational wealth. And I think going into this year's like my 4th year in real estate, now being really able to see like and helping these mobile home owners use the equity that they've gained from buying a mobile home those few years back and upgrading to something like bigger, like a residential.
I love that. That's amazing. So we look forward to helping more of that happen.
Yes.
So yeah, definitely
Contact us.
reach our team. Sonny likes to pitch. I don't like to pitch on the podcast.
I love
but,
to pitch.
but I think it really, I think for us it's trying to be the best out there so that people feel gravitated to working with us. So anyways, everyone, thanks for watching, and hopefully you guys grab value from this.
Yes.
Subscribe, like, share. Thanks, y'all. Take care.